Hi there, this is Andrew Brody with Yokogawa's Network Solutions Group, and today I'd like to talk to you about how to do automatic triggering of manual sample files for the DAQMaster, which is the MW100, or the DXAdvanced, which is the DAQStation. Now, why would you want to do automatic triggering of manual sample files? This is a good reason. Many people want to share data files and they want to bring them in automatically into programs like NotePad or Excel or WordPad, or just email them to a colleague. And with the standard data files on the MW100 and the DXAdvanced, they're in a kind of binary encrypted format, which requires you to use the data viewer. And once you're in the data viewer, you can then convert, of course, to Excel or standard text files. But you have that intermediate step of having to bring it into the data viewer in order to convert it into a file that everybody can see. Otherwise, everybody has to have a copy of the data viewer, or they need an extra piece of software like ReportWave or PrintWave to automatically convert these files. Now, the manual sample file is actually a text file, so it can natively be brought into Excel, Notepad, WordPad, emailed to people, and they can just open it up and see what's in it. Now, one of the things with the manual sample file is it takes a little extra time to write to this file. It opens up the file, writes the data, closes the file. So you're really limited on how often you can actually write to this manual sample file. And it's going to be somewhere between 2 and 5 seconds, just depending on how much data you're trying to write to the file. So a good limit on it is probably about 5 seconds, although depending on if you're just doing a few points here and there, you can kind of test it out and see what's going to work for you. So what I'm going to show you here is how to do automatic collection of data every 5 seconds into a manual sample file. And let's get going here. So what I have is the MW100, and I've opened up the web interface here. And the first place you're going to go is you're going to go to System Settings. So once I go to System Settings, you're going to go to Measurement Settings. Now what's important about this is how often you're actually scanning your points. You're not going to be able to sample any faster than you're scanning your points. So here's how often I'm measuring. Now remember this interval here, because I'm going to go to System Settings, Math Settings. This is how often you're doing your math calculations. So you're doing your calculations at the same interval as we've seen in Measurement Settings. So every second I'm going to calculate all my math. So to do what we're going to do here, you're going to need the math option on your DXAdvanced or on your MW100 DAQMaster. Okay? You can tell if you have this option by looking at the data plate on your MW100. If under suffix code you've got M1, Mary 1, that means you've got the math option. Also, if you try to go to math and you can't on the MW100, then odds are you don't have this option. So I'll show you later on why that's going to be important. Next place we're going to go is Event Action. Okay, so under System Settings you have Event Action. This is a neat place where you can take all types of events on the MW100 and tie them to an action. The DAQStation or DXAdvanced also has these options. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go Alarm Channel as my event. I'm going to pick the specific channel. In this case it's a math channel that I'm doing an alarm on. I'm going to pick the specific alarm for that math channel that I'm going to cause the action to trigger. Okay, so in this case, math channel A002, the first alarm for it. I'm going to set it up as an edge, so that's just when it triggers, and I'm going to take a manual sample. Okay, so I'm going to go back to top here, and I'm going to go to Channel Settings. I'm going to go to Math Channel Settings. And this is the math channel that I've set up. It's essentially what it is it's a 5-second timer that automatically resets. And then what I'm doing is I am then triggering an alarm on the 5th second. So let's look at this logic quickly. This here is an MW100, very similar, almost identical for the DXAdvanced, if then else statement. So what I'm saying is if math channel number 2 is greater than or equal to a constant, then reset math channel number 2 to a given value. Otherwise, add a given value to math channel number 2. So what I've got here is I've set K1 to 5. So as long as K1 is greater than or equal to math channel number 2, I reset it. So when I hit 5, I'm going to reset to K2, which I have set to 1. Otherwise, I'm going to take the math channel number 2 and add K3 to it, which I've also got set to 1. So every scan, I'm going to add 1 to math channel number 2 until I reach this limit of K1, which is 5, and then I'm going to reset to number 1. So if I go to channel settings, I go to math constant settings, we can see here. Here's my 5, so I'm going to count up to 5. Once I get to 5, I'm going to reset the channel to 1. Okay? And here's K3. This is what I'm adding every scan. So every math channel scan, which happens every 1 second, I'm adding 1. So in effect, I'm going to get a math channel creating a 5-second timer. If I go to channel settings and I go to alarm settings math, if I go to math channel number 2 here, I can see that I've set a high alarm of 5. So essentially, when that math channel hits 5, I trigger a high alarm, which in event action then creates a manual sample. So let's take a look at how this is running. So I've got the MW100 up and running here. I've already started my measurement and started my math. So here's my 10 channels of measurement. Essentially, the only channel I've really got set up for measurement is the first channel here. And you can see it's reading my office temperature. And we can see over here channel number 2. And what it's doing is it's counting up to 5, triggering an alarm, which in event action is then triggered from. And then it resets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 triggers the manual sample, resets. So now every 5 seconds, I'm getting a manual sample. All right? So that's the MW100 automatically creating a manual sample file. So let's show you the same thing on the DXAdvanced. I've got DAQStandard open and I've gone to a configuration file here. Under math channel, I've created the same math logic here. So we've already covered how this math channel works. Here's the constants over here. We can see here, if we go a little to the right here, we can see here's my alarm I set up. The alarm's a little different this time. It's a high alarm, still set to 5, but what I'm doing in this case is I'm triggering a switch. S1, think of this as an internal memory bit. This internal memory bit is what's going to trigger my event action. So when it gets into a high alarm, it's going to trigger this switch. If I go under general settings here, we'll see under event action, switch 1 is what's going to trigger my manual sample. And if I go to basic settings here, if I go to scan interval, that's going to say my 1 second. That's how often I'm going to go ahead and trigger this. So that wraps up the DXAdvanced configuration. So in this case here, I've just typed in, I go to start my computer, and then once my computer comes up, I just go to the address bar and I type in FTP 192.168.1.204. Okay, that's the IP address of my DXAdvanced. I then browse to drive 0. I then browse to my data path, which in this case happens to be data 0. And here's a manual sample file here, DAM. So let's go ahead and click on that. And we can see it's asking to open it. There it is. All right, so there it is, right in WordPad. Okay? And you can see it's a nice text file, easily open in WordPad. And you can see in this case it's scanning about every 5 seconds or so. All right? So let's close that guy out. I'm going to then shrink this guy down. And let's take a look at the MW100 here. So once again, I go start my computer. I type in the address bar, FTP:// 192.168.1.202 manual, because that's where the manual files are. And here's all the manual files here. Okay? So literally, I can drag and drop that to my desktop. So I've already opened it up in Excel here. And so this is what it looks like in Excel. All right? So we can see in this case here, you know, I've gone ahead and it looks like it's sampling about every 5 seconds in this guy as well. Okay, and here's all my points. And in this case, I was actually sampling a whole lot of points. Okay. So in this case, every 5 seconds, I was doing like something like 310 points. All right, I was doing 10 input channels, and I was doing 300 math channels. I tried it down to about 2 seconds, and I could actually do, you know, a few input channels, a few math channels. So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. But anyways, that's creating manual sample files within the MW100 and the DAQStation. This is Andrew Brody. Have a great day.